I'm back again. If you don't know me, I'm the guy that makes Magnus Protocol videos, but I've not uploaded in a while. A whole year, in fact. Short version is that I live on my own now. I've just had a lot of stuff happen. I wasn't really hyper-focused on the Magnus Protocol, and also school took priority. Also, at one point, I made a Minecraft YouTube channel. That happened.
Hey, Editing Pinky here. If you feel like playing a drinking game, please take a shot every time I use the word Magnus, Archives, or Protocol in this video, because you will be drunk by the end. Also, I apologize for the kind of lacking audio. Something went wrong with my mic, sorry.
What's gonna happen with this series? Because my usual format of recapping the episodes, then making theories about it with my cool theory board isn't gonna work because I'm, one, very behind, and two, a lot of that is me reacting to the things happening at the time, which just doesn't work. Now, like, the episode's already out. I cannot pretend to make up theories about things that have already happened. So I will just talk about my current thoughts on everything that's happened up until the first 10 episodes of season 2. Kind of give off my thoughts as a video log, because I do feel like I need to kind of talk about it to keep up with everything that's happening in the series. Season 1 ends in the conclusion where Sam and Celia go to the written reality, and it's revealed that Celia wanted to sacrifice Sam so she could balance out the universe, so she could keep existing in this universe, because she is, in fact, from the Archives universe. Diversity 1. The girl who was only dating you so she could sacrifice you is also pansexual. Alice follows them because she figured out that the archivist, aka Error, escaped from the Magnus Institute because of them and is now following Sam and Celia. And Sam falls into the rift together with the archivist. Meanwhile, Colin gets eaten by a computer. I realize how weird this sounds out of context. And also, Lena loses her job and Gwen becomes the new head of the OAR. Also, Trevor Herbert's the Prime Minister of England. That's the thing that happens. So, season 2. Alice is kind of losing track because she's trying to figure out what happened to Colin and what happened to Sam. Meanwhile, Gwen's the worst boss ever because she doesn't know what she's doing. Also, she hires Stark Wall security. Alice meets up in Germany with Heinrich and Heimlich, who is a delight and a highlight of this entire series. And meanwhile, Sam is in the Magnus Archives universe and meets up with Melody and Georgie, and we kind of finally get to see what happened post-apocalypse in the Magnus Archives universe and how that was handled, which is kind of cool. Meanwhile, the archivist is now loose in the Archives universe. And that's where we leave off, because again, I'm recording this when there's only 10 episodes out for season 2. What I kind of wanted to talk about is this nagging feeling with the Magnus Protocol that I don't enjoy it as much as the Magnus Archives. And I came to really put my finger on why. Because I don't want to compare the two. I want to see the Magnus Protocol on its own merits and meet where it's at. The problem is, with everything that's happening in season 2, this is a sequel now. This show has now officially shown itself to be a sequel, even though it was never marketed as such. That's what it is. So I'm gonna have to kind of talk about it like it is a sequel. With that, I also don't like being negative in my videos. I don't want to be negative for negative sake. This channel is specifically so I get to just talk about the things that I really enjoy. So talking about this, it feels a bit wrong, but also it also feels wrong not making a new Magnus Protocol video. So I don't want this to be a critique. I just want this for me to kind of talk through my feelings on this series because I do really enjoy it. I want that to be clear. I do enjoy the Magnus Protocol. It's just that there is something back of my mind that's like, something's missing here. And the first thing I noticed with the Magnus Protocol is it's a lot more structured. It has arcs of 10 episodes where there's a case that mentions an external, and then that external gets teased, and on the 10th episode, one of our main characters gets to encounter that external. It's followed this pattern for multiple arcs now. This makes the show kind of predictable because you know what's gonna happen. Another thing that I've noticed is how it's a lot more character focused. A friend of mine mentioned this as well. It focuses more on the dynamics between the characters than the world building like the archives did. A good chunk of episodes are more about the characters, what they're doing, and them talking to each other than with Magnus Archives, where a good chunk of the episode was the statements. The statements were really carrying the load of the story. And you could argue that the Magnus Archives does have a similar formula to Protocol, in the sense that you have a creature that gets introduced, and then by the end of the season there's a massive encounter with this creature, and that being kind of the resolve, which, I mean, that's also just basic story structure, but it does have that same structure. But there is a difference in how it's paced, because the Magnus Archives, again, has those really long chunks of statements with a lot of information. There is a lot more to notice and a lot more to pull apart and figure out what is important in the story. Whereas, again, Magnus Protocol does this every 10 episodes. And with the Magnus Archives, it's really exciting when, for example, you meet the Not Them as a creature and you start figuring out, hey, that's the creature from episode 2. But there's 30 episodes between that. Which, with the Magnus Protocol, is a lot more fast-paced, and because of that, it's a lot more noticeable and a lot more predictable feeling. And that's not inherently the fault of the Magnus Protocol, because people know what to expect. The novelty of the concept is already gone. So I don't fault them for focusing more on the character bits, because you can't really keep up that same mystery and novelty that the Magnus Archives did, because people will already pull apart literally every little detail from every statement. So all that energy that's usually focused on the mystery, the mystique, and the littler stories get focused into the character writing, which Protocol does really well. But the issue with that is that cases start feeling kind of useless. It feels like they're only kept around for the sake of the format, instead of as something that's there to enhance the story. This is a critique I also have of season 5 of the Magnus Archives. And I'm not saying with that it doesn't have good or important statements, but it feels like it's there just to keep content in between the actual important story bits instead of it leading up to them. I feel this the most with the London arc, where I really had a hard time focusing on the statements because it didn't feel like they were giving me any new information that was important to the whole world-ending plot that was going on. It's the same with Protocol to me. And not to say there isn't important information in them. Stark Wall as a security company has been introduced in season 1. And because of that, when they are mentioned in season 2, we already kind of have a context and an idea of what they are and what they're capable of. But still, it doesn't have that same intrigue that Archives had in its statements. It's a lot more straightforward. The Magnus Archives is filled with a lot of these smaller stories that happen alongside it, and Protocol doesn't have that double narrative. It doesn't have as much hauntings from the past as Archives. You don't have little details like the fact that Oliver Banks and Jane Prentice knew each other. Is that important? No, it's not. It's mentioned in one statement very casually, but it's these little things that make the world feel very alive. And Protocol just kind of misses that. I'm not feeling that same double narrative. The only narrative that haunts Protocol is the one of John and Martin. And also, that is not to say there aren't any good cases in Protocol. Shout out to Cannibal Baby, which is one of the most unsettling cases ever. If I had a nickel for every fiction podcast I enjoyed that had a baby cannibalize their own mother, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. So with the statements, it feels like the show shouldn't have been this formulaic or in this format because it feels like this story could have been told in a different way. Protocol is not being elevated by its statements. It's just using them because that's the format they're supposed to use. And that's a little bit disappointing because, again, Archives was built on top of its statements. The statements are such a core part of the show. I shouldn't have to feel like I could skip statements, even if not every statement is important. You never know, and there are so many little things that build on top of each other, so many double narratives, so many little haunts that exist in this universe. And I'm missing that with Protocol. And talking about the narrative haunting of John and Martin, there's one mystery that kind of stays in the Madness Protocol and hasn't been answered yet, which is ultimately the narrative draw that we should be looking for, and that's Freddy, or the whole JMJ error situation with computers. And the fact that that hasn't been answered yet is fine. Again, that's the main draw of the show. I don't want it to be answered yet, but I am really scared for the answer because all evidence points to it being John and Martin, and we don't really get any additional evidence beyond that. And if it is genuinely John and Martin, that'd be so disappointing as a mystery because we figured that out before the show was started. John, Martin, and Jonah are actually stuck inside of technology. But that's to say, I do enjoy how Freddy is handled. It's the most interesting theme that the show has going on. It's the one of constant surveillance through technology. Freddy is always there listening. We, as an audience, are listening through Freddy. But it's not only always listening, it's also very subtly responding, like how Celia usually only gets cases about doppelgangers. Freddy knows she's from a different universe and is very clearly telling her that. And I find it a really good subtle horror of algorithms and technology and how it's such a pervasive thing that we are constantly being watched and constantly being analyzed. It's really cool. Then again, that's not a theme that really centers the show. I struggle to name one theme that really centers the show in general, which is a thing that I found really hard to pinpoint. What is the show about? I've asked a few people and I've got a few different answers. And I find that a very interesting question. What is the main theme of the Magnus Protocol? And I would really like if people commented what their ideas were. The thing that I kind of came up with was the dynamic between Sam and Alice and their codependency, and how it's similar for example, for Celia and her kid. The things we do for the things we desire feels like a very main theme in the show, but then again, I can't say that with certainty, and I do think that as a lacking aspect of the show, but maybe I'm also missing something. And then lastly, I really don't like the implementation of Archives characters in Protocol. I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense for the story, because it does. But the way, for example, in season 1, we spent so much time, genuinely so much time meeting up with Archives characters, which then ends up not really leading to anything. It feels like we're just doing that for the sake of doing it. We're not expanding on any themes, we're not doing anything with these conversations. I would have rather preferred for these characters to maybe casually appear in a statement or a case on the background and be like, hey, this is what these characters are up to now in this universe, and we could kind of pick apart that, instead of them being so in our face. Unless it's Agnes Montague, Alex and Johnny, please put Agnes Montague into the show and all of my critique will just disappear. I won't complain ever again. And if I had a nickel for every time a show I enjoy came out with a sequel series which was placed in an alternate universe where it's following different characters but also has old characters casually returning, I'd have 4 nickels. And I don't think Protocol does it the best out of these examples. I'd argue that the best examples are in fact Deltarune and Persona 2. Both of these do this concept really well. So much of Melanie and Georgie's dialogue is just exposition. You could replace them with an exposition lamp and nothing would change. There is no reason for them to be Georgie and Melanie outside of the fact that, like, I guess it makes sense, but they don't add anything. I don't feel like I learned more. Yes, I learned more about the world, I guess. But for how interesting both Melanie and Georgie are as characters, I don't feel like they're being utilized in a way that actually expands on them. But there is a good example of how Protocol does this, and that's Celia. Celia is a really good inclusion of an archives character because they expend so much on her. I could talk, of course, for hours about Celia, but her inclusion is so interesting because she's a character you would have probably not remembered the name of or cared about previously. And they add so much onto her, and it's such a funny little inclusion, and it immediately builds on multiple layers of her character because we do know parts of her life, not much, but then it opens up questions. How did she end up here? What happened to her for her to be this and be this person? That's a really good implementation of a character from a previous show because we are adding on to it. We are using this character to its fullest potential. And that being said, again, I don't want to be negative. I don't want to be like, they shouldn't add any archives characters at all. Because I do, again, there's a lot of media I like that do this concept well. I want to enjoy Protocol for its characters and its story. And for this show to kind of constantly go, hey, remember this from the previous show? You like that, right? This is the character you enjoyed. Without giving me much. Like, yes, of course, I like seeing Gertrude again and seeing her be in a good relationship with Jerry. That's genuinely so fascinating, but also, what does it add to the story? Why is she here? What did we learn? What themes are we getting from this? Because it's just fan service. And that's fine on an occasion, but like, we need more. Either make it a direct sequel or not. Pick a lane. The show doesn't know whether it wants to be its own thing or a sequel. So that was kind of my ramble about my thoughts on Protocol right now. Again, I want to say that I don't want to be negative. I love this show. I enjoy watching the episodes. I do really enjoy the character dynamics, and I think that the show does this really well. It's just that I've had this lingering feeling that something's missing, and I cannot pinpoint it, and it's been really hard kind of making videos on it and theorizing on it because there isn't much to theorize on, because everything is so straightforward. The only mystery we have going for us is kind of Freddy and that kind of stuff. Then again, I also don't find that tangible enough or something we get enough information about for me to say anything about it. Maybe in retrospect I'll be like, oh, these were all the pieces that were leading up to this and I just didn't see it. I'd love to be wrong in that aspect. And I really do hope this show kind of wraps up in a very interesting way. So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about instead of theories. And I've struggled making a theory video or a recap video because it's just, these have been my feelings about it. I noticed myself not being as enthusiastic about it as I usually am about things. Because I'm usually very enthusiastic about things. That being said, if I do have more thoughts on Protocol, I will make more videos. I do generally, at least at the end of the show, want to make a video kind of looking back on everything, maybe I'll make a Celia video because I do have a lot of thoughts on Celia. I also have a script for a Silk Versus video that I've worked on for basically like a year now, and I only want to release that once it's perfect, which is, it will be perfect one day. And thank you for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. Again, I hope this isn't like a super disappointing negative video. Why would he be Prime Minister?